Hello and welcome back to some more chats about D&D. Today I want to go into a little bit of a conversation about map making. So I previously did a video on the digital map that I drew. I'll put the image up on the screen just now. I also discussed this a little bit during my first video that I did about D&D recently, and I didn't go into a lot of detail. So maps are a lot of fun to draw, but if you are either A, not experienced in drawing maps, B, aren't any type of artistic, you might not want to even make a map. And honestly, you don't. There are plenty of online maps that you can have for free. If you have bought any of the pre-made campaigns, such as the Dragon of Icespire Peak, that already comes with a map, and you could probably take that map and just use that for any of your campaigns. For example, if you had your own storyline, your own government, your own everything, but you just don't want to draw a map, well, just use that one. There is absolutely no harm in that. There's also no harm in just taking the map of, for example, Britain and just using that with different names. Like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, if you do want to draw maps, I have some fun ways for it. So the way that I did it is I took an A3 sheet of paper. I took a handful of dice. It was actually like all the D20s I had at the time, which was about 30, but you don't have to use 30 dice. And that's just what I happened to have at the time. And I just dropped them onto this A3 sheet of paper. And what I did is I drew around the outline, so where the like most outer dice were, I drew around that, and where all the inside dice were, I put a little cross. This was the shape of the country, and each of the little crosses on the inside was some kind of landmark or town or something. It was a lake or a forest or a mountain, or there was something, wherever those little crosses were, there was something in that area that was some kind of landmark. So what I did is that shape that I had, instead of having it as a nice smooth line, I did it in like little like outcroppings and incroppings and things. I did a couple of chasms going in, but instead of having it as a smooth outline, I basically made it look a little bit more scraggly, and that is how I did the outline. Now, I did this 5 different times for the 5 different countries that I have. You could do this one time if you are only going to be playing from one country. I had a country hopping campaign kind of brewing in my head, so I wanted them to go to different countries. I wanted them to focus on this first country that I was making, but I did want other places for them to go, so I did do that. But I did that 5 times, and I then went into each of these little places, all these little landmarks, and if it was to be a town. Now, I had no random way of deciding this. I was looking at the piece of paper, and one of the dice had landed very, very close to where the outline was. There was 2 dice that like landed together, so I was like, Port Town. And that is what became St. Aria, which was like a big thing in the campaign. There was one at the other side that also did the same thing, and that became Vagion, which is the capital of this country. There was also dice that kind of landed in a row, and what I did with those ones is I made those ones into a mountain, because it was like quite neat in this row. So I used those ones and just made them into the Basisha Mountains, and there was one dot on the other side of this one line, and I made them into a town, which was Mount Tefel, and this town was on top of the mountain. So looking at the map, it was quite clear that, okay, so this dice landed right beside this ocean, so that's clearly going to be a port town. And there was, whenever there was something that was close to another dice, it was always like, oh, okay, so this is going to be a forest within the town, or this is going to be a lake that's beside the town. But using a little bit of creativity in this part was, yeah, I kind of had to do that. I like to try and cheat my way through all DM skills, including map making, and randomizing as much as I possibly could was fantastic. Going on to decide which parts were going to be towns, which parts were going to be landmarks. It did take a little bit of thought. I'm not the most creative person, or at least I wasn't back then anyway, so it did take a little while for me to decide, okay, so this is a town, but that town is too close to this town, so that's going to be a big town, that's going to be a little town, but maybe I could turn that town into a lake instead, because then it's a nice landmark for some kind of story to happen. And I would do this until I'd used up all of the little crosses that were on the map. It was then time to start doing a little bit more detailing. Now, when I drew my maps initially, I would draw a circle, or some kind of outline, and if I coloured it in green, that was a forest. If I coloured it in blue, that was the lakes. If I coloured it in grey, it was mountains. I didn't really put a lot of drawing detail into these maps. However, they were fine. Once I had finished this map and put this little bit of colour into it, I did it the other 4 times, and I photocopied from my old works printer I reduced the size of it, so I put the A3 sheet in and I reduced it and copied it onto A4, so it was a little bit easier for me to play with. I actually later went on and copied this again onto A5, and I cut out each of the countries, put them onto an A3 sheet of paper, and then like modelled them around to make the world. Which is basically a forest in the middle, and then there was the two at the top and then the two at the bottom, and I sellotaped that all down. I copied it onto another A3 sheet of paper, and then I had one map, which I then copied onto an A4 sheet of paper. I used a lot of paper for this. I could have saved myself a lot of steps. I didn't have to actually draw it out onto another A3 sheet of paper to then reduce it down to another A4. I also didn't have to draw each of these on an A3 sheet of paper. I could have drawn them on A5, but I work on bigger scales. I quite like to do the A3 drawing because, well, it's better to have it bigger and you can reduce it. Whereas if you draw something small and you have to enlarge it for whatever reason, it's quite difficult to do that. So yes, that's why I did that. I didn't have to. I also didn't expect to do it 5 times and then copy it a few times to reduce it, to put it onto a big sheet to then reduce it. I didn't expect to do all that. But I did. And you know what? That did us. That did us for so much of the campaign, and in fact it was very close to us actually finishing that campaign that I even moved on to the digital side of things. So what I took out from the whole thing is that, number one, I didn't have to do it on paper. I really didn't. You also don't have to have it. So if you were going to use this method of doing the dropping the dice on the paper, maybe do it with mini dice on smaller paper. It was just very helpful to me because I didn't know where to start. So dropping that dice on that paper and just letting the dice decide. If you have been watching any of my other videos, you know that letting the dice decide is pretty much how I planned all my NPCs. So yeah, dice, yes. I am a dice goblin. I have a humongous bag of dice and I don't need it, but I love them and no one ever getting them off me. But that whole map did us for a very, very long time, and it was only when I got a little bit more confident in my digital drawing ability that I decided that I was going to move on to doing the maps digitally. I did mine in probably the longest way that I possibly could. Another way is actually just taking the outlines of different countries and things. Now, obviously, if you're going to take Italy and turn that into a country, people are going to go, that looks like Italy. Or if you take the whole of the States, people are going to know it's the States. I was trying to decide on like, how else would I have drawn those maps? How else could I have used other stuff around about me to make these maps? And I thought, you know what, actually? See the districts in Scotland, so the council districts, they're all got quite interesting shapes. For example, the Highlands of Scotland is a whole district. I will actually have a picture up on screen to show you what I mean by the districts. But that has like a very, very fantastic shape. And there's another one as well. What was it called? Argyll and Bute. The West Coast, by the way, it's really, really, really pretty. That would be absolutely fantastic for like an archipelago. It was really, really, really cool. And I thought you actually probably could just take the shape of those and turn it into your own little country. It'd be awesome. And it's like, I probably could have done something like that. I wonder how many people would have noticed. Considering that all my players were Scottish, if I used like the Perth and Kinross district, like city district, would they have noticed? I wonder. Because you definitely could use that. But there is good ways, there is bad ways, and then there's long ways. I'm not saying my way was a bad way. I mean, it did waste a lot of paper. It was fun though. So that's how I do my maps anyway. And honestly, I wouldn't take it back. It got me really, really into the kind of artistic side of D&D, and I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. So definitely wouldn't take that back. I had a lot of fun doing that, and I would probably do it again. Although I would probably do it just digitally. Maybe it would probably be good to take that A3 or maybe A4 at this point, sheet of paper, do the outline of what it is, do all the crosses, and then put that onto the digital and sort of trace over those shapes. That might be good. But anyway, that's how I do my maps, and it definitely took a long time, and I would definitely do it again. But as I said, you don't have to have that. You can just Google D&D country maps, D&D world maps, obviously being careful for any type of copyrighted things, but there is a lot of free assets online. There is also the fantasy town name generator, by the way, just to let you know. That really saved my ass when I was creating my world. You also have the maps and the pre-made campaigns, which you could play in that world if you didn't want to create the whole world. You could use just the world map and have your own towns, your own governments, etc. Or you can have fun and use some dice to do it. Anyway, I just want to talk a little bit maps, because for me, having some kind of visual aid really helps me, myself anyway, get immersed more in these campaigns. There is absolutely nothing wrong with not having a map. If your characters are in, you know, if they're in Vagion and you say they have to go south to Fushila and they have to go north to Mount Tefel, they have to go west to Bemir Lake, honestly, that's all they need to know. In their heads, they can see that Vagion is like in the middle there, and they go up, down, west, or if they go east, they're going into the ocean. You know, for them, they don't really need any more visual guides than that. But I do like a visual guide. I like to be able to look at a map and say, okay, so I can see here that I've got Vagion here, and from Vagion to Fushila, it will take X amount of days. Or if you went from Vagion up to Mount Tefel, it was quite a distance away. You had to go through Helm first, which had like a whole thing with Helm for druids, and then you have to go over the mountain to get to Mount Tefel. So I knew by this visual aid that yes, go north and you'll get there, but there's a lot in the way before you get there. I liked that visual aid. I had a whole book that had all the countries and things, and I was able to open it and go, ah, okay, so from here to here. I loved that. It was a more preparedness that I really enjoyed. So you don't need it, but if you like some visual aids, it's fun to do. Also, I would say there is some fantastic people online who sell them. I also sign up to someone on Patreon who does all these fantastic maps for battle maps, etc. And there's definitely people out there who also do them for country maps as well and world maps. So you do not have to do this. You don't have to have the absolutely incredible ones of Exandria. You don't have to have the fantastically drawn ones in the pre-made campaigns. You don't have to sit down and painstakingly draw individual trees for 6 hours. You don't have to do that, but it's fun to do. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I just wanted to talk a little bit maps because I love maps and I'm very, very proud of my map. And if you ask me questions about my map, I am happy to sit and talk about it for ages. So please do. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to hit the like button below and subscribe for more because I post every Friday. I also stream over on Twitch every Wednesday and Saturday. So if you want to see me live, go check me out there. But whether I see you on YouTube or I see you on Twitch, I look forward to seeing you there and I'll catch you next time. Bye!